Good day, and thank you for allowing me to enter your cell phone. Well, I am not easily shocked, but I expected people to show up to formal instruction dressed more professionally now that YouTube streams both ways. Apparently, not everyone
Like you.
was aware of the incessant march of progress, all of which reminds me of a story about view cameras and their lenses. Welcome back to ViewCamera. This is session 2, and we are looking at lenses for our view camera. The lenses that we're going to be looking at today are here on the table. We're going to start with the 150mm lens. Our 150mm lens is the equivalent to the 35mm or the DSLR's, the 50mm. So if you're looking for a normal lens for your view camera, you'll want to start off with a 150. This is a very basic lens and very easy to use, and it's going to do pretty much everything you need it to do for a general lens. So a 150mm lens is a great lens to start off with. The next lens that we're going to that I've got here on the table is our 90mm. This is getting into the wide angle lenses. This particular lens is great for doing close-up work, anything that you need a little bit more wide angle. If you need something for wide angle outside and doing maybe some close-up to some piece of architecture, this is a great lens for doing that. It is also good for doing product photography. So if you need to get close to a piece of a product, this is going to be your lens. You do get a little bit of distortion with the 90mm, unlike the 150. Just because we are looking at wide angle lenses. This lens also may need, just so that you're aware, you may need a bag bellows to go with it, and also a recessed lens board. Now let's take a look at it. This is a regular lens board on this particular lens. And so let's take a look at another lens that actually has a recessed board on it. This is the 75mm lens that I have here in the studio. This is a very wide angle lens. It's going to have some distortion to it. It is great for doing some macro photography if that's what you're into. And it's going to be a good lens for those kind of things. But you're definitely going to need two things to be able to run this lens. You're going to, besides the bag bellows, so you need the bag bellows, you're going to need a recessed board just like this one. So the board is actually back further so that the lens can fit back against it, and so that when your film plane is here, your lens is now going to be closer to that film plane or to your digital plane, and that's because of the recess here. You're also going to need to have an elbow. Now this elbow is going to attach to the shutter release area. So that when you attach your shutter release cord, you're going to attach it to the elbow so that you actually have room in here to actually get the cord in, because otherwise the cord may not fit inside of the recessed board. So that's another reason to have that. The last thing that we're going to look at is a very narrow, or a much more narrow lens that I have here, or a telephoto lens. This is the 210mm lens. Sometimes these are much larger lenses. So this 210 is going to get you a lot closer to your subject. This is awesome for doing landscape photography and also doing some architecture work, especially if you need to get a little closer from far away to the architecture. This lens is going to mostly always sit on a regular lens board, And other equivalents to, or other lenses that you might want to choose from for doing telephoto could include a 300 millimeter or 600 millimeter lens. Those are some options for actually doing telephoto. Now let's take a look at lens boards. Let's look at lens boards. We've got a couple of different lens boards here for different cameras. So this is a Horseman lens board compared to a Cambo lens board. If you've got a different camera, if you've got maybe a Linhof or a Sinar, you may also have different size lens boards that are going to fit on those particular cameras. A rail camera may have a different lens board than a field camera. So make sure that you're checking whatever lens board that you're purchasing you make sure that it actually is going to fit onto your camera. One of the other things that you're going to want to look for on your lens board is the hole size. So there are 3 different hole sizes that come on our lens boards. There is a 0 copal, a 1 copal, and also a 3 copal, which I don't have an example here of. Those are going to take different size lenses. Now the back of the, when we look at the elements of the lens, they've got to fit onto the lens board. And to do that, you need to make sure that you have the right size hole or opening for that lens to fit onto. Now let's take a look at taking our lens and putting it onto our lens board. Our lenses here, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take off the lens caps just to make sure as we do this, just so that they don't slip around and the lens doesn't slip around in my hand. I'm going to take the front lens element off of the shutter. So to do this, I'm just going to undo the lens itself and unscrew it. It just pulls right off. It unscrews right from the shutter. And we'll look at this. So this is our front lens, okay, and that's our front element. Then we have our shutter, which houses our shutter and our aperture. We're going to take this off of the back element. And once I have the back element off, I've also got a retaining ring. This little retaining ring is what holds this to the lens board. So we're going to use this to actually put this back on the lens board. Before I move on and actually do anything else, I want to make sure that this has not been cocked, that the shutter has not been cocked while I'm doing this. Make sure that it is, you can always press the shutter release button, make sure it's not cocked. I also want to make sure that the lens is closed down by using the preview button to actually close the lens down. Make sure that if you're working on the lens, that you're not touching the elements inside of the shutter and the shutter housing here. That's the aperture and the shutter. You don't want to touch those with your fingers. You don't want fingerprints on them. You want to keep those nice and clean as much as possible. So don't touch the inside of our shutter. Before I move to actually put this onto the board here, I want to make sure that the element is clean on the inside, so that when I put this on the board, this will be clean. Now there are, you can use a lens cloth. This one doesn't need a lot of work on it, so I don't really need to use any liquid here, but you can use liquid and also some cleaning cloth or some lens wipes. Those are a great way to do this. I'm just going to make sure that there's no dust on this element and make sure that it is nice and clean. Then I'm going to take this and to attach this to the lens board. So this is my lens board that I'm going to attach this to. I need to make sure that the copal's the right size. So if I take my lens here and I'm looking at the back here, if this copal fits inside there, and then if I turn it over, if I can put the retaining ring on here, then this is going to fit on here correctly. This board is too big. So this is this board, if I put the retaining ring on right now, this would not stay on here. So this is a copal 1, I believe, and I need a copal 0 for this. So I'm going to switch over to this lens board, and this is actually the lens board I need for my Horseman anyway. So I've got my lens board here. I'm going to take my copal here, and it fits nice and snugly inside of this lens board. I'm going to grab my retaining ring. So I've got the shutter and then my retaining ring and my retaining ring, and I put this on the back side. I'm also going to make sure that when I put this retaining ring in, there is a little edge to the inside of the retaining ring, and that should be in towards the lens. That's going to fit between the lens element or the shutter itself and the board, so that it actually will keep the lens from moving up and down or around in here. So that's why the retaining ring is so important. So as I twist this on here, I'm just going to get it down here so that it is going on. Just when you do this, you might want to, sometimes you'll have to move this around until that retaining ring goes inside of the copal shutter, the copal hole, so that you can actually get this in place. So I'm getting it in place here, and I'm starting to get it get it tightened down. I'm going to flip this over, and I want to make sure that this is going the direction of my lens board that I need it to. On a Cambo, I've got an up and down here. Basically, I know that the top of the on the top of the Cambo is, got the name Cambo. Plus, this is where the standard actually fits onto the ring. On a Horseman, for example, this board doesn't have a particular side to it. It's just a square, so you can put it any way that you want on the square. Then what I need to do is I need to find my aperture and my shutter speed, and I want to put it so that it is facing up on one of the sides. That was going to be my up position. Once I have that in place, I can take a lens wrench. This is a lens wrench. Put this back in place, and we'll go back to this other side. That's the point side, and then this has got actually a nice flat standard screw driver ends to it, and there's two of those. I'm going to then loosen this up on both sides, and I'm just going to fit this to the retaining ring. So once I get this into the retaining ring, now there are also, besides this type of wrench, there are some cards. The cards are a lot easier to use than, say, this particular type of wrench. I'm just going to turn this wrench until I get this nice and tight so that it's not going to move anywhere. So my shutter is now on my board, and it is on there nice and tight. We'll add the back element. Again, I just need to make sure that it is clean, so I'm going to clean the element real quick. Put this on here, making sure that there wasn't any dust on there. Tighten this down, and then we're going to flip this over. And I'm going to clean the front lens element, going to clean the lens itself, and also the back part of the element. And then I'll screw this onto the lens, onto the shutter. And once I have this in place and tightened down, I don't want to over tighten, because if you over tighten, you might not be able to get it off the shutter very easily. So make sure that you don't over tighten anything. And that goes with the same for the retaining ring and the back. Once I have it on there, the lens is attached very well to the lens board, and this lens board is now ready to go onto the camera. Now let's take a look at shutter release cords. We have a shutter release cord here. This is our general shutter release cord. The parts of it are pretty simple. Up at the top we have our trigger, which if I push it down, it should and releases. That's going to actually send the cord through and down and into our shutter release. That will fire the camera. So when this part actually intersects with the release on the camera, it's going to fire it. We can release it. If we were in bulb mode or time mode, we might want to, on this particular type of shutter release, we would turn the release ring here, the retaining ring down here, until it is loosened. And then what happens with this is when I push it in bulb or time mode, this will lock the trigger in place, leaving the end here to open up the shutter and leave it open. When the time is done and I'm ready for the shutter to actually release again, I just have to push slightly down on the retaining ring here, and it's going to lift it back up. To set it back to normal, I just push down and turn it, and that's back to normal and ready to release on a regular basis again. That is just a general release cord. You may need to add an elbow to these release cords for a specifically if we're using a recessed light board, lens board. We might add this on. This is just going to basically screw into the end of the elbow. The elbow then will attach directly to your lens, to the shutter release port, and that should actually get you going with that. You do need to usually put these on prior to putting the lens onto the lens board. If you do not, basically it won't fit in there properly, or you'll have a hard time getting your hands in there to actually get it in place. So that's the best way to actually add this on here. One other type of shutter release cord that you may have or may have seen, like in movies and stuff, is the bulb shutter release cord. Now this is great for doing selfies and photographs of yourself, or if you're doing a group, or if you need or maybe you're working with children. It allows you to actually get away from the camera, work with your model. So it's got a very long cord here. It is air driven, so all I have to do is push on the bulb here for the end to come out and to fire the camera. So this is an great way to actually do that. These are very helpful for extending the release too, so that you have a long way to get away from the camera, because these are probably about 12 feet most of the time. Get you a long ways away from the camera. So let's look at actually adding the release to our lens. So we're going to pick up our lens here, and right here we have our shutter release. This is where our shutter release is, and our shutter release port. So we're going to take this and just screw it in. We want to make sure that it goes in properly, because if you get it at an angle, you can strip these. So be very careful. These will actually the port here can be changed out if for some reason you've damaged it and you've that it's become damaged. You can actually change those out pretty easily. All you do is screw in the release cord. If you cock the shutter, so we'll cock the shutter, then I should be able to fire the lens very easily that way. Now let's take a look at our shutter. This is the biggest part of our lens. I've taken the lens elements off just to be able to show this. So to go over the parts, the basic parts of our shutter here, we have our shutter release, which is going to fire the lens. Just above that is where the shutter port is to actually attach our shutter release cord, which we've already talked about. Behind that and back to the back of the lens, on the back of the shutter back here is actually where our aperture is located. This is going to open up our aperture. You'll be able to see the indications along the aperture here that show you what aperture you're going to be at. Most of these apertures are in third stops, so you can actually see the third stops along the area here. And most of them will start out at around 5.6 for large format cameras. And then go all the way up to either 45 or 64, one of those two. We got the shutter speed ring right here in front of that indicates our shutter speeds. Most of these will go up to about 500th of a second, maybe 400th of a second, depending on the lens itself. Beyond that, the next thing past that is our PC sync area. This is where we would add a sync cord to this. So I'd take and add in the sync cord. Then right next to that is the shutter preview lever. So this opens up the shutter to be able to see through the lens when we're getting ready to focus. So when I actually put this on my camera and I'm trying to focus the camera, I'm going to open up the preview. So just by pushing up here, that's going to open up the hole here and allow light to pass through through into the back, so I can actually see what I'm doing in the back of the camera so that I can focus. Then I'll open up my aperture all the way to its maximum aperture. If the aperture is all the way to a very small opening, it's going to make it really hard for me to see the image on the ground glass in the back. So I want to open this all the way up until it's completely open, and that will be to its largest. When I get to the largest opening, that's when I want to preview and actually work on my focus. If I wanted to, during this process, and I'm looking through my view camera, if I want to preview the depth of field, I can also do that by leaving this open and then moving my aperture up. It's going to darken the screen, but it will give you a preview of your depth of field as you're looking through. Once I have that all set and I've got my focus ready to go, I'm going to close back down my preview lever, and so that it closes down. I will then take my meter reading. I would set my aperture to whatever aperture I'm going to set my aperture to. Set my shutter speed to its speed. Say at this, let's say a 60th of a second, and then I would cock the shutter, just like that. I would make sure I have a release cord on here to do this, but you can actually fire the shutter just with the shutter release itself and click open the shutter that way, and that would take a photograph if that's the way I wanted to do it. PC sync right here on the lens. We can add on our lights. So for example, if I'm using a strobe that I'm going to be firing the lens with, I'll need a PC sync cord to attach here. PC sync cords will attach to this point, and then it will run to either your digital back, or you can run it directly from your camera to the light system itself, or to the box that you're using. Whatever means that you're actually going to fire it with. It could be a transmitter also. But this will allow you to actually fire the camera. Lastly, let's take a look real quickly at shutter speeds. Shutter speeds, like I said, start at around 400th of a second. Now, the great thing about a large format lens, and especially the way the shutter works, is that there is no sync speed with a large format camera. You can go all the way up to 400th, 500th of a second without worrying about the sync speed, because it's built the way that the shutter is built into the actual shutter casing here. It allows it to fire and not have to worry about that sync speed. So we actually get a very fast sync speed with our lens here. You will also find that with your shutter speeds, there are going to be a couple of others down here at the very end. There is bulb. Bulb is for very long, extended periods of time where you're actually firing the camera, and you want to you could take your shutter release cord and fire the camera just by pushing it down, and then just for however long you want it to be down, and then releasing it. You could also, if you wanted to, you could use the ring on the shutter release cord to actually hold this down for your time, if that's the way that you would like to do it. The secondary way would be to actually use the T value, which is on the lens. And what this does is, as you when you hit your shutter release button, what that's going to do is it's going to hold the lens open indefinitely. The release will come back up, and that's fine, but the shutter will actually stay open until you once again hit the shutter release cord, and then it will release the shutter again so that it closes. So that's how the T works on your lens. Some lenses also have a timer. Not very many of them, but they may have self-timers on there so that you can throw it on self-timer and then run into the scene and get your photograph that way too. So one other thing that is really important about our shutter is that with our camera or lens here, when we're taking care of our lens and putting it away, make sure that your lens has been fired, that your shutter is not in the cocked position. Because what this does is the internal workings here, the winder that's in there, the little spring, if you leave this cocked that entire time that it's been put away, what it's going to do is it is going to eventually really damage your spring, causing it not to have enough spring in it, and it won't fire properly, and you'll have to replace the spring. So once you put your shutter away, make sure that you have fired the shutter. Let's look at taking our lens on and off of our camera with the lens board. So we've got our lens on our camera. Currently, let's take it off and just see how that's done. Different cameras are different. This Horseman has two brackets, one at the top and one at the bottom. These are going to pull out towards me and up here towards me, and that's going to lift and push down the bar itself so that it'll let the lens board loose. On Cambo, for example, there's a switch up here at the top, and it does have arrows at the top, up the top, that will actually tell you which direction for the lens. If it's pointing towards the lens, that means it's going to release the lens. If you push it the other way, that will release the bellows on the back. Other cameras are going to be different. So please check your camera for the way to release your shutter, your board. So what we're going to do on this one, to release the board, I'm going to make sure I have a good hold on my lens, and then I'll pull down on the bottom one and then pull up on the top. The bottom one first, because it's easy, it's a little stabler when when I'm taking this off, and then I pull the lens off, and that brings the lens off of the camera. To put it back on, it's just the reverse. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in its a little place. I'm going to push up on the bottom down here, so this will push up. Now this one tends to like to be pushed a little bit in the center while I'm pushing in, just to get it in place, and then I'll slide the slide down up here at the top until this is in place, and it's now locked in place and it is ready to go. We've been looking at lenses and how they work, and also the different focal lengths that there are in our lenses for a large format camera. Now let's look at changing the lenses out on our camera. There are two different methods. The first method is a very simple method, and that is to actually have two lenses on different lens boards. So you have a lens board for each lens. In this case, what you do is meow this off, and put this one on, just like this, and voila, we have changed lenses very quickly. Our second method takes a little bit more work, but is very viable, especially if we don't have multiple lens boards of the same copal size, but we do have the same copal size shutters. We can actually switch out the lens very quickly. So what we would do is we would grab our lens. This is a copal 1 size shutter, so our shutter itself is a copal 1, the lens board's a copal 1, and so are the elements. We're going to change out the elements. So we're just going to take the front element off, and this is going to take a little bit of unscrewing there. We're going to set that aside, and usually I'll use a table to do these above, just to make sure that I'm not going to drop the elements, and that way they don't fall on a concrete floor. Then I also need to make sure that I change out the back. So we're going to take out the back element. And this is so that I can actually change out multiple types of lenses. Maybe I'm changing out a 150 lens for a 90 millimeter lens. This is the case here. That I've got two different size lenses. This is a 210, and we had a 90 on here. We can then switch this out, and we've got a smaller copal here. This is actually copal 0. We're going to change this whole entire board out for our new lens here, and just put this on here, and voila, we have our lenses changed out. So now we're going to change out the 210 lens for our next lens. Tony, do you have that lens ready?
Kind of using it right now?
I don't care, Tony. Give me the lens, please. Please hand it on over.
Ow. All right.
All right. Let me get this on here. Wait, that's not the right kind of lens. That's your contact lens. And it's not even a contact lens. It's just a piece of paper that says contact lens. Did you have that in your eye? Let's take a look at taking care of our lenses. The first thing that we want to talk about is actually our coating on our front of our lenses and actually on the back of our lenses too. There is a coating on the front of the lens that helps to protect the lens, and we want to protect that as much as possible so it protects our lens. So in order to do that, we want to actually make sure that we're doing a few things. A, we don't want to put a bunch of fingerprints all over the lens. The oils in our fingers will actually damage the emulsion on the lens and create problems with the lens over time. Especially if you put the fingerprint on there and then put your lens away, that lens is going to sit there with that oil on there, and that oil is just going to eat right into the emulsion and make the lens become trash, basically. Next, when you're cleaning the lens, you want to do this. Not really. You don't want to do that. That would be stupid. So we want to keep our lens nice and clean, and we don't want to put our digestive juices all over the lens. That's another bad thing. So don't be going onto your lens and spreading lots of germs on your lens too, and all those wonderful enzymes from your mouth onto your lens. You don't want to do that, okay? So what you do want to do is you want to use a solution, a lens cleaner of some sort, specifically a lens cleaner, and you want to be able to do this in such a way that you're actually cleaning the lens properly. So let's look at actually cleaning our lens. We're going to grab our solution here, and using either a lens tissue like this one or our lens cloth. We've got a lens cloth specifically for doing our lenses. We're going to get a little of our solution. Now, if you have a spray, do not spray it directly onto the lens like this. No, 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 no. We don't want to do that, okay? So that we do this properly, we're going to actually take and we're going to get a spot on our lens cloth here, and we're just going to get a little of the solution onto the lens cloth. And starting in the center of the lens cloth here, or in the center of the lens, we're going to just spiral from the inside to the outside of the lens, cleaning the lens just like this, and making sure that it is nice and clean. And if we see any dust, once we're done with that and it dries, we're going to take our blower and we are going to blow off any dust off the lens here. We've also got a little soft brush here, and we can just brush off any dust that might have stayed on the lens, and we'll just get that dust, any dust off of there, and we're good to go. One other thing that we want to do as we're putting our lens away is that we might want to use a desiccant. This is a package of desiccant silicone that I keep usually in my 4x5 case, and along with my lens, especially near my lenses. Lenses are susceptible to getting molds and stuff in them from partly from being cleaning and also the humidity. They'll trap a little bit of moisture in there, and they can get they'll start to grow molds. Well, we don't want that to happen. So if you put a desiccant container in there, some of these are actually will turn colors once they are done and being used or have gotten old. So that's a great way to keep your lenses nice and clean. There are also some other options at home. You can have a lens, a little lens fridge to put your lenses in that actually keeps them at a certain temperature and keeps the humidity away from them. That's a great way to actually store your lenses too. If you are like me and don't have that option available, the best way to do this is to get yourself a lens wrap. These lens wraps, they are soft, very and very easy to use. Just get your lens. The one thing that you want to do is put your lens caps on. So I've got my back cap already on the back of the lens here, so I'm going to put on the back cap and your front cap, and we put those on our lens, and then we're going to put our lens in the center of the lens cloth, wrap our shutter release cord around it. Make sure again that your shutter release has been released, that your shuttercock isn't wound up, And then we'll just make sure that we fold this over nicely. And we'll put this away so that our lens is now ready to go. It is going to stay nice and clean. It's not going to get dirty. This is a great way to store your lens in your box while you're putting your camera away. There are also lens boxes that are available out on the market that you can actually store your lenses in without wrapping them. That's another way, and you can put those easily to have all your lenses together in one box to help you find your lenses when you go out to do your shoot. Thank you for watching our series here on ViewCamera. This is the second video. We've split this video into two parts due to the length. There is more information about how lenses work in our second video, part 2, or part B as we actually call it, and we hope that you'll watch it. Please subscribe to ViewCamera and give us your feedback on our comment section. Did you have a good time playing with lenses?
Yeah.
What you got there, Tony?
Lenses.
Which one's your favorite?
This one. It makes the pretty picture.
It makes pretty pictures.
It makes the pretty picture.
Say goodnight, Tony.
Good night, Tony.
Good night, audience.